Okay, we're now recording here. Now, this is Vince Gimno. We're opening the meeting at 2 o'clock on Monday, April 18th, and the current chair is Alex Leader. And the first priority of business was Mr. Leader has indicated he no longer wanted to be chair of the committee and was willing to step down if the chair can be appointed at this meeting, a new chair appointed at this meeting. So with that, Mr. Chairman, you can conduct a dialogue involving the chair.
Well, I guess the first order of business would be to accept nominations of anyone who'd like to be chair of this committee.
I'd like to nominate Jeanette Rinaldi.
Would Jeanette Rinaldi be willing to accept that nomination?
Yes, temporarily.
Well, perhaps.
Yes.
Are there any other nominations? Well, would we like to then proceed with a vote? All those in favor of electing Jeanette Rinaldi to chair this subcommittee on second-tier licensing?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Then I would be happy to turn the gavel over to you and let you conduct this meeting and hereafter.
Clarence, for the record, though, can we say who's present? This is no reason who's speaking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. President, for the record, those present are Mr. Alex Leader, please signify by being present.
Aye.
Ms. Jeanette Rinaldi.
Aye.
Mr. David Austin.
Aye.
And the board president as an ad hoc member, Kathy Ditzler.
Aye.
And Vince Gimno, the executive director for the agency.
And those are the participants who just voted to elect Jeanette Rinaldi.
The vote was 3-0, accepting that the new chair shall be Jeanette Rinaldi.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you for that. I'm hoping that you'll be happy with hand-holding as we muddle our way through with me as the chair. So I guess the first thing I'd like to address is I wrote up a kind of a template of what I thought would be pertaining to Dr. Rinaldi being here with us. Unfortunately, didn't get put on his schedule. So he is going to go ahead and take a look at this little template, and I thought it'd be a great place to either start or whatever we're going to do there.
Ms. Miller, we might want to say what your goals for today's agenda would be, so we can move the meeting quickly.
My goals for today's agenda are to work quickly through this template and add or take away from it so we could really encompass what our goals as a team for the two-tier are, and then find out who's going to be handling what. Maybe we could delegate a few of these items off, or have the staff take a look at some of the research we may need to have done, or maybe we could do our own research. And then make sure that we understand we want it to happen by 2012, so it could be brought before the board, and then maybe 2013 as a bill.
Let me also ask you, and one of the things that I brought up to Mr. Gimno is that where is it that we all stand right now with the way that the second tier is going? One of the things that I provided when as chair was I wanted to make sure that we took a look at our prohibited ingredients. It was the salicylic acid being excluded. It's the 644.470 number 2, just deleting one ingredient from the list of prohibited ingredients. That was number 1. And then I also provided this committee with, on a couple of different occasions, just the current curriculum. So you can see I mailed it the first time on June 28th, and then November 9th of 2009, and then June 28th of 2010. That's where we talk about the prohibited ingredients. And then that next portion was August 17th. Are we really thinking that a two-tier licensing is really the most important direction for this board, or are we just going to be looking at an adjunct to medical aesthetics that cosmetologists could participate in because they're licensed? Not necessarily nail technologists, and not necessarily instructors, not having a whole second tier of instructors.
Right, and I'll just go and clarify that because we went over that last time in depth, and I think that one of the things we came up with is the current practices of today's estheticians is different than what we're commonly or currently the scope in our aesthetics license
Right.
now. So, yes, we need to expand our current aesthetics program, and then possibly through this, in discovery, add a. We had talked about, Dr. Benaldi and I talked about maybe some sort of internship. So maybe a little bit more varied, a little bit more, your basic and something that goes with clinical esthetician, which therefore creates 2 tiers, because it's a necessary and viable incident. Look at this binder full of information.
For me personally, governing in a second tier seems outrageously large, when really what these binders come up with is an adjunct to aesthetics.
I don't agree, because the thing is if you all of a sudden you find out the newest greatest thing is to use a laser and you want to incorporate that into your field and you've had training for that, then you could bring that in as your new protocol. If you're not trained for it, then you're going to go back to school, or just you completely can't do it, but a medical esthetician can. So I think it's prohibiting to you. So I think if you have a little bit more education in our curriculum through the schools, like a generic training on generic machines, because there's so many different machines, we've talked about that last meeting as well, that maybe it might open the doors for you to progress, because it's going to progress whether we like it or not.
I agree with Alex here on this.
Yeah.
Let me go, because I see where you're going with this, and I'm in agreement also. But it doesn't necessarily have to be taught in schools. So what we really need to do is get people from the medical board in here with us.
Right.
Because what we could possibly do is, if they've had these trainings, we'll allow under their license to do it under doctor supervision. But then we'll still allow it within our licensing under doctor supervision with particular training, particular hours in said manner. But I agree with Alex that putting it in school particularly, and the instructors in second tier may not be the way to go, the way it looks, because it's moving very quickly. Like you said, things keep coming out. So if there's another licensing agency that's willing to take some co-responsibility
For training.
and
possibly
for supervising. So it would be, we can set up with them. They'd have to have these particular trainings or take these particular things, and we'd recognize the certificate. However, they'd still have to be under
Right.
the doctor's
And
supervision.
if we let me just go through this with you really quickly, okay? So we talked about all that. And then coming down here, what the typical job description right now, if you're in a doctor situation, and these are just 15 years ago, Alex, so bear with me. If your client is scheduled, your patient's scheduled with only you as an esthetician, we're not trained really to use medical forms, that you're doing a patient consultation in the medical environment. You're also doing finding out and determining patients' needs on a totally different scope. You might using a lot stronger acids, lasers, and then you're going into proceeding with that treatment, and then you go into how do you care for that, and how do you sanitize your area if you're not trained in that? Which you're penetrating blood level. We're not really trained in that very much, and especially now with all this new information that we have. So, but if the doctor sends them in, then they're going to absorb some of that responsibility there. But really, I think that's a lot of responsibility for an esthetician.
I think it's a lot of responsibility for the school.
That's right.
Well, I think if
the
it's a
beauty
generic
school,
training.
I can't imagine my beauty school that I attended being able to qualify me for what I would consider the second tier medical aesthetics. Like, my beauty school would never have been able to get me there. So I got myself there by seeking education, attending conferences, working in a medical practice, and being educated through that medical practice. So for me personally, when we start looking at the second tier licensing, I almost feel like exactly what you're saying. The field of aesthetics has really changed. But is it really a whole second tier of licensing across our board? I mean, when we looked at our licensing, we had like 15, 16 different license categories, it seemed like. And if we're talking about allowing hair designers to have a clinical hair designer, I don't know, it seems wacky.
Well, we're not going to revisit that because we've already went through that. So I totally understand what you're saying. However, we need to still focus on the issue of we need more current regulations or more current training on what people are doing, because they're doing it whether we like it or not.
But really, because they're able to do it, because we don't have a licensed cosmetological establishment within that medical practice, and we have continued advertising that I'm a medical esthetician. It happens. It's happening because once they're not in a licensed cosmetological establishment, they can call themselves what they want. They may have gotten there because they're a licensed esthetician, but now that they're there, there's no regulation.
Let me interrupt for a moment, because I hear the dialogue going on right now is, do we put it in the schools or not and require that? There's no need for that if we don't want it. One of the issues is, much like the nursing board said, if you want to do this kind of activity, you have to obtain training from these kinds of approved training centers. And then that's allowable. Then, in our case, if we wanted to have a second-tier licensing, we could set forth the certain training that would be available in the nursing field or the medical field that would say there's 214 hours or whatever in injectables or whatever, and that's how you would be qualified to be a second-tier license.
Right.
If you have this, or this training, then you're eligible. If you do not have it, that's been approved by either us, the Board of Medical Examiners, then it allows us to say we have the authority to issue a license on a second tier because you have had this minimal training that we require. That's how, if you want to do it, that's what I would suggest as the easiest route. And the doctors, the Medical Board of Examiners can tell you who they approve for certain kinds of activities. And the Nursing Board can tell you to do that. That's why I've talked about having those folks sitting in on the meeting, bridging.
Yeah.
So we say,
right,
if you have these educations, we're willing to license those. We'll pass an ordinance or a statute that allows us the authority to do that. Without that, you can't be one of those. And so what it does, though, is we'll be stepping on the toes of the doctors and the nurses unless they're agreeable to that. If they are and see that as a feeder operation, great. If they don't, then we would have a problem.
See, here's where also I think that protects the public. So what will happen is the ones in the doctor's office who have not gone to those courses, have those trainings, will be replaced by those who do.
Right. So it has a whole blossoming effect. And for me, you could then be a vendor in a beauty school. Like if I offer that approved training and it's already approved by the nursing board, then I just go to your beauty school and offer that. And now all of your folks can get it just the way that they would have through the nursing board.
See, the nursing board nationally has certain programs that they approve nationally. And they have compacts. That's why the nursing board is effective, is they have compacts of dozens of states that sign on and says this set of agreements will allow us to use this nurse in this state, that state, the reciprocity kind, or the movement, quick movement. But what also they're doing is saying, an example in the legislation I passed out, they're talking about you can't give injections unless you have this training, period.
I know, but isn't that putting the cart before the horse? I mean, it's like, okay, so you can get this training, you can get that training, but there's just no real curriculum. There's no designated curriculum.
I think it's important that we have medical professionals here discussing this with us.
Well, Kathy.
I have a question, and this may seem irrelevant, I don't know, but I know we're talking about physicians in the second tier and where we're going with it, and I'm listening to each of you. Where does dermatologists fall in on this? Because to me, they're going to be, we're stepping on their toes.
Well, actually, they want to hire qualified non-physician prescribers. That's actually something you want to write down. They want non-physician prescribers. Those are nurse practitioners, estheticians, medical estheticians that are registered as a medical esthetician, because there is a registry for medical aesthetics now. And then and physician's assistants, PAs.
Well, where does dermatology fall in?
Well, they can supervise those categories of non-physician prescribers.
That was my question.
Yeah,
non-physician prescribers.
So what I'm suggesting, Jeanette, is first of all, we have to decide as a group, what do we want, what's the target you want to get to? I don't think this group has ever come to agreement as to what they see as the final target or the target they want to investigate to see if it's possible. And then before you get there, you're going to have to decide, yes, that's the target. So then we can do research backwards. What's available? Who's allowing it? What would the doctors say about that?
And we had talked earlier about, looking at the different states and what they've allowed, and maybe adopting some of their regulations and this and that, because
I don't
in
like
place.
the regulations.
Right, but I'm just thinking, if we have, when Dr. Benali and I had talked about this briefly, they definitely are doing things in different offices. Now, they're all calling themselves medical estheticians, but different offices are offering different things, and there is no standard. And so it's very dangerous. So to protect the public would be, definitely one of our goals. And also to provide a new path for estheticians so that they could achieve, a better living, in my mind.
And you're saying that comes from a second-tier licensing.
I am.
From in that license category now. What I'm asking in the very beginning is, do you want it to kind of stay exclusive to that category with the addition of cosmetologists because they can perform, but restricted in those other 13, 14 categories for the time being? In other words, the position paper that was prepared for you on August 17th allowed for it across the board. There would be clinical cosmetology schools, hairdressers, mani-pedi, nail technologists, all those categories, instructors.
Right.
But now, is there a way to funnel it to those two categories, cosmetology and aesthetics, and still keep that clinical cosmetology intent of a second tier, but make it workable? Because to me, it hasn't been workable.
Right.
Because it's been a little inflated.
Right. No, I think it should be just funneled to one, which would be you have your... And Kathy had mentioned breaking all three up, which might be a good idea. But I still think you have an esthetician and then a clinical esthetician. Now, what that looks like as far as achieving the desired results, I think that would be one of our goals.
Let me throw a monkey wrench into the thought process.
Perfect.
And you'd still have to have a clinical
He
cosmetologist.
made the mention of a cosmetologist.
Right.
And under our chapter, a
Right.
cosmetologist is eligible to do any and all of the things.
All of them. Yeah.
Aesthetics can only do aesthetics.
Right.
But the cosmetologist could be an esthetician.
Right.
So the issue is, and I think I hear what Alex is saying, is if we add, you're either an esthetician or a cosmetologist, but if you want to do any of these other things,
Right.
then there's this additional training that must be acquired.
Must.
Must be acquired. It's mandatory.
Right.
That we
Shall
will.
be.
Yeah, shall. The word shall. Sarah has a hard time with may or shall. But it shall be that you're able to do this. Now, if you want to do that, that's a decision to say we'd like to really look at that. I don't think we can do it effectively, get a bill passed to do any of that without the support of the Board of Medical Examiners and the Board of Nursing, who said they're not trumping on our feet and we see the value of that occurring. That's what I see politically. So my questions to you, is it worth doing that? And we target on not changing our chapter.
Right.
We leave the chapter in totality. We might have to put one little caveat in saying that any esthetician or cosmetologist who wishes to proceed into other kinds of activities, and we say medical-oriented
Medical
activities,
aesthetics, yeah.
then these are the minimum trainings that you can work under our license, or you must divorce yourself from our license. That kind of thing.
I like that. You like that, Dave?
That's a solution
Well,
to
I
that
think there
problem.
it is.
Then the next step is for us to get doctors who are doing the medical spas to give us their views of how it operates and
Right.
why, and the values and what they lose if they don't have it. Then we get the nurses, the nursing board in, and we talk about their position and are they feeling that we're trumping on their territory or not. And maybe the dermatologist. There's a number of discussions where we have to have these guests come in and talk about
Right.
what gets in their way, what binds them, why they like estheticians to work. And I think you're right on the fact that they're already 2/3 trained. Now we're just focusing the training. And the concern I've had is the doctors don't do the training. They say they do.
Exactly.
But most of them do a 2-hour training and that's the end of it.
And the doctors usually don't do it. It's another esthetician showing you.
Yeah.
I'm going to touch on what I talked to you about.
Okay.
And that is as far as when you go to this second tier, whatever, and you're using cosmetologist in there. Now, I know that as a cosmetologist, I can do aesthetics with very minimal hours. Alex is an esthetician, and he took, at the time, he took 600, okay? Even when I graduate, I do not have the same knowledge of aesthetics that you do, but yet I can still do what you do.
Right,
Well,
but
we
then
can
he
fix
just
that.
addressed
We can
that.
fix
He
that.
just
And
said,
that-
yeah.
No, I think it's a perfect answer because, for instance, if you wanted to go into aesthetics now, you have the basic licensing, and you could do something because there's really non-invasive procedures that you're going to be doing
Right.
as a cosmetologist esthetician. If you take your next level, then you would be getting into more intrusive.
Now you're
modalities.
a cosmetologist, medical esthetician.
Right,
so
but
to
would
speak.
I not still need the extra hours just to get to your level?
Well, he just addressed that. He was saying, yeah, you could kind of mandate
What the
that.
minimum training would be.
Yeah, what the minimum training is, and then you also mandate that you're not in. You wouldn't have the same scenario that the gal had today, which is, oh, hey, I want licenses in all categories because I'm
Right.
entitled.
I think
You'd
it's a
get
good
this
idea.
like little way that you could get a license, and that would be the
An
way.
example that
It is minimally required now.
what Alex picked up on is that if you were an esthetician and we felt that the difference between a pure esthetician and a cosmetologist who's authorized to do aesthetics work might be there's a critical piece in there that says you have to take this 100 hours of training to get
Okay.
to the level
That was my
as
next.
part of the next step that requires the minimum training levels that you would be allowed to go into that field.
And one way to resolve all of this is to do exactly what the District of Washington or District of Columbia did, which is say, well, if you want to be a medical esthetician in the state of Nevada, you pass the NCEA exam. And that's the deal, period. And
That's
there
what they
you-
did. That's
Yeah,
what
now
they
all of a
done.
sudden then you build around that. Now you build your requirement. Once you
We're
make
not-
that basis of testing requirement, then now all of a sudden you build your components around it.
Yeah, we're not
That's-
saying that you have to do that. He's giving
was
you a
one
model.
way.
that would-
That was
Right, and
one
we
way.
talked about that. So I think that's something we
So
could
the
look
issue-
at and see if we could make adjustments to.
The
you know,
first issue is
different-
what does the board want to do? I mean, does committee want to do? That's the first.
Well, number one, that thing that I don't want to do is require a medical practice to have a cosmetology establishment within that practice. I think that's insane. So that I can tell you more things of what I don't want to do than what I do want to do, if that makes sense to you. Because I think if you try to go to the medical board and say, oh, you have to have a licensed medical esthetician in your licensed cosmetological establishment within your licensed medical facility, that's just going to be blown out of the water.
That's what my point when I was
Right.
before, that if we create this, then it'll eliminate the need that will allow our licensees to do that without.
Right. So number one, I don't want to create anything that inhibits somebody from hiring a more skilled licensee. Because that's really what we're talking about. We're not allowed to call them medical or advanced. So really they just have a higher skill set that is applicable in a medical setting. That's
So,
really what they have.
What I hear you saying, Alex, is that you're not creating a new license. You're saying that currently we say you can't work out of your scope of practice, and it must be in an or a cosmetological establishment. Under that condition, we would say, if you're properly trained, approved by the board to go into other areas, then you can work outside of an establishment, and it has to have this minimum standard of training. And then what you're doing for the doctors and nurses, saying, if you want people who are semi-trained before you even get to them, and they have the special training that you also agree that's necessary, then you have now a worker pool that's available to you that are highly skilled already in a particular field, and now they've also had the additional training that protects your spa from the problems that we all talk about, things like unqualified people giving injections and things like that, like what happened in that.
Well, I think it's a great idea. And could we do that where we put those regulations in as, okay, if you're working in a medical facility, it has these minimum requirements. Can we go in and regulate those people as a service for a fee? You know what I mean? So I don't know what a license costs usually, but let's say
I think they would like us to regulate it.
and for a fee.
I don't know. They surely don't want to pay a fee.
No, not them paying the fee, but that would be part of your licensing fee structure. Regulatory compliance is built in.
But that's what I'm saying. We're not going to license these people because they're already a medical spa.
Well,
or
they
a
could show
facility.
up with a license for sure.
Here's one of the conditions
When
we
I
would have for
apply,
them to
I can
hire
have a
one of our
license.
licensees working under their scope.
Licensing.
Yeah.
Yeah, our licensees under our scope,
Right.
which gives permission to work in a medical spa.
Right.
We would have the right to come in and check to be sure they are
like
in
a green
fact
card.
trained properly.
Right.
And they're doing the kinds of activities that we allow.
So we wouldn't need to charge them an additional fee.
No, we would do that.
That would just be part of
The
their
normal
being
process,
licensed
yeah.
under.
Right, it'd be part of their licensing fee, which could be a little bit higher than the current state of
Now that we have a basic goal that I think are really important,
not even sure that's
we have
what-
somebody from Board of Medical Examiners and Nursing Board before we go
Agreed.
any further.
That's correct.
Because they might, if they're going to fight against us,
Yeah, we're never
not
gonna
going
get-
we're not
it'll
going
never
to.
Well, Lou is on the Board of Medical Examiners, A, and B, he is all about it.
But this has to be written up.
We need them to sit here with us because otherwise we're just spinning wheels.
Here's where we've got to go,
Right.
guys.
No, I
We
think
would- I think we need to get in our mind what we want to do. That's the first part of the
Well,
dialogue. I think we did that or are about to do
You
that.
verbalize it very well.
And then what we want to do is then schedule those people. Now, Dr. Benaldi is one for making sure we got his point of view and how that might affect our overall thinking. Then we start to craft the format, what it's going to look like, and then we make an appointment with the Board of Medical Examiners, whether the executive director or the chairman of the board or both of them, and sit down and say, look, we're trying to help you and us solve this problem of unqualified people working across lines, and all you do, everybody catches hell whenever there's a mistake. So this is what we're offering up. We can be a feeder level group that has licensed people in fields that you guys normally like, but we know that there's not enough training for them. And we will want to know how can we work a deal that would allow us to get what we want, safe, qualified people out of our license that we can now say it's okay to work in these places, but they have to have the minimum training that we've decided is important. And I'm sure you can help us with that. And at the same time, that would be acceptable to you to support us doing that, so there's no conflict between the two boards. That's the first issue. Then we have the natural distance between the nursing board and the doctor's board, because there is competition there based on a lot of issues. We would then sit down with them and say, look, we're working with the medical board of examiners to try to figure out a way to solve some of these problems. From our side of the equation, we want to be your partner, and we want to make sure that we comply with what you think is important training for people who do injectables or any of the other things that we do that they might object to. Because if we can get them to say nothing, that's a win. In other words, they don't say, we object. If they say, well, okay, but we're not going to support it, we're just going to sit in the background, that's fine. If they say, gee, we could come along if we have part of the discussion, then the next step would be to have the three bodies get together, our group committee, and the subcommittees of each of those two agencies, and sit down and say, can we hash out what each of the problems are and where can we draw the line, and then we know what we could allow. And I think that as a long-term plan, that's workable. But it's going to take a lot of give and take, a lot of dialogue, and a lot of us maybe crafting the original design and then being willing to take criticism on.
Well, the other side of that pancake is I would like the committee to own the word esthetician. If you're going to have an unlicensed individual working in an unlicensed establishment presently, I don't want them calling themselves estheticians.
No, they can't unless they're properly qualified.
So this committee has to own esthetician.
Yeah.
If we're not going to own it, well, then all these people are going to take it from you, and you're not going to...
How do you feel about that, David?
I kind of feel we do own that term.
Yeah, but he's saying that it could be wrestled from us with medical.
We're not
Only if you allow
enforcing
it.
it.
Only if you allow it.
The problem is we're not sending people, we're not putting in, and doctors who've got people with their placards on the wall,
Saying.
because I know people work in some of those offices they've got placards on the wall saying with their name, medical esthetician.
And
Yes.
they don't have any legal right to use that.
Nope. But we haven't sent anybody in.
When you say legal right, define that. How
can't be
are we
allowed-
going to enforce it? If we're within our legal rights to take it,
But we
or
can. We can go in there and basically say, and we can't do the doctor. We can call that licensee before the board and threaten their license.
But we want to work with the medical
We want them to
examiners.
be agreeable.
So I'm saying that if, and we want to work with the nursing, with that community, and if if we're not going to have that relationship, then I also think that there's another side of that relationship that they're taking advantage of. And we, as a board, need to try to establish what are our requirements to our 3,700 estheticians that we take money from and spend. We spend their money. So we owe them a certain amount of responsibility to that
The
branding.
issue is going to be, we own the term and license for estheticians. They've created a second level called medical esthetician that is not legitimate, and there's no regulation plus or minus for it. And the Board of Medical Examiners have never adopted that, so it's not a legitimate legal term. But they use it regularly. We have the right now to interfere with these medical spas by calling in the licensees and saying, you're not working within the scope. So we can cause a hell of a lot of problem, which will be a backlash in the medical side, saying, well, they're cheap labor we can use, and we don't like you messing with our, that's what's going to happen.
And it would be a backlash to us.
So
too.
the issue is, we can say, esthetician belongs to us. There's no such thing as a medical esthetician. But we can allow you to use it if we can guarantee that our estheticians are working under the scope of what the approval of the board is. Then you can use the term, and we won't object.
And we can broaden the scope.
But they are, that medical esthetician is an extension of enhanced training of an esthetician.
In fact, I wonder if there would be a class action suit, since we charge the licensees money, then the licensees don't get any benefit from having someone who's in an unlicensed establishment using the same brand name. It almost sounds like they could all get together and kind of take on some of the medical spas, because it is an infringement
So
on
what we
that
might,
brand.
one of the work plans, and it's been taking a long time to get to this point. The bottom line is, it sounds like everybody sort of likes the idea, but the issue is going from idea, our talk, to practice is a hell of a lot of work. So the next step would be to start scheduling frequent meetings sufficiently enough where we can make advances quickly. And the first part of the series of meetings it would have to be was to have those parties be invited for dialogue with the subcommittee. In other words, I would invite, Dr. Benally's already been one of the members that have been discussed. I would suggest a meeting of that. I would like to hear from Dr. Williams from the South.
Because he'll be more kind of opposing. He's not in the past been real open. He's getting more open to that. So
Yeah, so
I'd like to hear his. And I actually also have Susan Hilger, who is a PA and an attorney who teaches ethics at the Toro Medical School. So
what I'm suggesting is a work plan that has a series of meetings on a monthly basis or something frequent enough so we can get these interviews done, record their ideas, summarize them, and see where they match and where they just do not match.
right?
And then, in the meantime, we can start working on a crafted suggestion of what it would look like. And then try to identify some of the kinds of educational capabilities that are out there to get certification as an injector or whatever else they do. Well,
Gosh, there's so many.
And there's
I think
many.
ethics is a really
But
good one.
NCA may be a good basis because they have some ideas of
Well,
what's
NPI.
or the nurses.
Well, if you recall, Vince, y'all approved me going to that conference in Denver for advanced aesthetics a few years back, and I just, unfortunately, my schedule didn't permit me to actually go to that one. But, it's intense how many there are. NPI is the most. You can get actually the download on NPI. They teach up at the lake. So if you ever are interested, I can give you that additional information.
me-
Yeah, I really
Let me
am.
suggest this.
National Procedures Institute.
What we
is
can do is
NPI.
somebody who is familiar with those kinds of things could see if they could do some research that would identify a number of them that might be eligible for consideration, as the type of training and the number of hours they offer would fulfill the gap that we're looking at right here. The nursing board, I know they have their own training recommendations for injectables and things like that. They actually, in their documentation I've seen in the past, they actually name the kinds of certifications that they have to do it. And
Right.
how many hours it takes to get it, and who sponsors them. that kind of stuff. That's one issue, because it will give us some credibility that we're knowing what we're talking about. The second issue is we need to schedule meetings in such a way that we can start interviewing these people one after another, bang, 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 get them done. And then once that's done, we can hopefully then say, this is what we envision it looks like, this is the training that would be available, and these are the number of hours. You got to have A, B, or C training, which all are acceptable to do this kind of work, because it covers the type of stuff you guys are worried about. And then from that is deciding if that's the plan and getting buy-in by the other 2 or 3 boards and commissions to buy in.
When we have these people coming to sit down with us, do we have a list of criteria that we're trying to achieve from each interview?
No, here's what I would say. Keep it generic enough to where you say, we describe the problem. We have estheticians that are attractive to doctors who can hire these folks, but they cause us a lot of heartburn because they aren't really trained to do those kind of activities. They're not allowed to work outside an establishment. That's the way the law reads. And we're trying to figure out how can we be your partner.
Yeah.
Okay, what is it you guys really need, and why do you hire those people?
Right.
And the second part is, what training do you give them that causes us heartburn, that says they're not really qualified, why we don't want our name attached to it. See, and that's the dialogue. But you've got to ask them what they use them for, what they pay for them, why they even want those kind of people.
And then number 2 for me is they want, as an esthetician, I'm working in that medical setting because I want the prestige of my aesthetics license being hung in a medical office. So actually, we want to help legitimize my promotion of myself in my medical office. That's really what we want to do. It's let's get it out of the closet. You don't have to be in the closet as a registered medical esthetician any longer. How can we help your medical estheticians get out of the closet?
Right.
It's really important to me. I don't have a problem. An example, we've had a lot of dialogue on salicylic acid and all the peels. We don't allow our estheticians to do peels.
Right. No peels.
But if they had specialized training that deals with that activity, and they're under the supervision of a doctor, then it's a different kind of discussion than what we have right now. So that's what we need to examine, is what would it take to say, if you want to do that in a medical spa and then doctors want to do peels and you're not currently qualified, what training would be required to allow you to do that?
To bring that employee up to speed.
Yeah. See, that's how I see it. Mm-hmm. And so we would not really be changing our chapter much, but allowing to work out properly trained individuals with a board-approved training that we consulted with the other people that would allow them now to work in a medical spa without us objecting.
And quickly.
And we would want the right to come in and check on it.
And safely. Quickly and safely. I mean, that's the key. It's I try to, whenever I think of these regulations, I try to think minimum standard requirements. That's what we license.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the arguments against the poor gal today was that she had kind of substandard passing scores on her Washington State, but the fact of the matter is they were still passing.
See, the bottom line is, I misinterpreted that.
No, I understand. I mean, it was all...
But the bottom line is she actually admitted she had no training in those fields.
Yeah, crazy.
What I asked because they haven't asked.
Yeah.
So that was why
I reiterated it. Yeah,
See, that's
because it was
the same-
crazy.
I think we all did.
I knew that. I knew she hadn't.
That's the same logic I'm using with this.
Yeah.
Properly trained people, we should be able to work a deal of how we approve them between agencies.
And so, Jeanette, for me, when you approach a doctor, it's hey, currently the Board of Cosmetology has minimum standard requirements, but you're asking for a higher standard, a higher quality, more professional, educated employee. How can we help bridge our
What is
licensees
missing?
to that level? It's a perfect transition. I mean, it's why would they not want that buy-in?
So the doctor may very well say, I'm going to hire Kathy because she's a fully educated cosmetologist, can be esthetician, but their board requires 200 hours more training in things like use of lasers, injectables, and all those kind of things, and chemicals that might cause peeling. And say, okay, we will allow her to work that and give her permission if she has that training. So does she pay for it or you pay for it? Either way is okay with us. We don't care. But until she gets it, we're not going to authorize that. When she gets it, she's approved.
And until she gets it, I kind of sort of think she's called a medical assistant. Not an esthetician or a medical esthetician. She's called a medical assistant. She has a different name because she hasn't met the requirements of that clinical cosmetology
And she is working
level.
out of our scope.
Yeah.
Right. She's working outside the scope.
So she's not-
let's get rid of
we
the
don't have
I
whole.
really like that girl, Kathy, too.
I like that girl, Kathy, but she can't be calling
Mm-hmm.
herself an esthetician if she's not in a licensed establishment. She can't keep doing that. She has to be an esthetician in a licensed establishment. Once she's outside of that, medical assistant, something else. Something else.
And what's happened, and the reason this has caused so much heartburn, is they're calling a medical assistant, and the definition of a medical assistant can vary so broadly that you can be a MA in a ophthalmologist office, and the doctor said there, because I asked him, I'm going for my eyes, and I asked the ophthalmologist, who trains these people? We do. And what's your training regimen? He says, we do 2 hours every week for 10 weeks, under the exact supervision of the ophthalmologists themselves, who say, I am your doctor, this is how it's got to be done. And all they're handling, to be honest with you, is putting the things in your eyes and running the machines. They don't do any invasive stuff, but they do a minimum of 20 hours of training with the ophthalmologist being right on the site, teaching them each of the items. Now that at least is pretty basic. I mean, that says you guys care about me, so you're not going to put the wrong stuff in my eye by accident, because they're well trained. I don't know if that's the training right or not, but it might be a 40-hour course under an ophthalmology school that teaches people how to be the assistant or the medical assistant to an ophthalmologist.
Right.
So are you thinking that the schools could generate more income by having this additional training, or there'll be a separate
No,
school?
I don't really even see that our school's doing anything.
So it would be a separate school,
I
like
see
this
that-
particular school that's coming up.
I see it as vendors, not even per se
Yeah,
as school.
approved vendors.
Approved
yeah.
vendors.
And I think the approved vendors sounds like it comes from the nursing board more than the medical
they-
examiner's
they've been
board,
doing
because
research.
That's
it
why-
sounds like the nursing board has already made a place for themselves in terms of what can and can't be done by assistants.
Safely done, is
Yeah.
how they-
And so the medical examiners, I think they just kind of want these non-physician prescribers because it enhances billing.
Where they went on this new law is they said even a registered nurse can't do injections unless they've had the 2-hour training.
Yeah.
And now they've got months and months and months and years of training. They've licensed, but they can't do injectables unless they do this and get the certification. That's how they've approached it to try to protect themselves from these fly-by-night operations or the misnaming of these people.
Well, I think the real reason is a nurse is well educated
Oh,
and
phenomenal.
consequently does not want to be undermined by a non-educated medical assistant.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's
That's
taking your
their-
job away.
Right.
That's
And the
their
same
views.
thing with medical aesthetics. I think you have the same exact thing. Why is it if you're in a medical setting and you're doing aesthetics work, why can't I just call myself a medical esthetician now, even if I have no license in aesthetics? Because I'm not being governed by this board. So, hey, I'm all of a sudden a medical esthetician because I'm doing chemical peels in a medical office.
Let me, in the hopes of speeding up the meeting so people can catch their planes if they have to go on, is that I think that's an excellent process where we are. I think it will start to craft what it might look like and say, what kind of requirements are we going to need, and start building that. In the meantime, we need to schedule these people for meetings, and I think we need to say, do we want to have a monthly meeting, bi-monthly, every other meeting? How do you want to deal with it? You're the chair, so
Well, I'm open for suggestions. Are you guys open for once a month? I mean, I don't mind flying to, but you're here too, so there's 2 of us.
Yeah. I like these back-to-backs because it's one day for me. I'm finding that it's really hard for me to leave my shop during this
So let's see how the
tidy or
back-to-back.
tiring
So the next board meeting in Las Vegas is scheduled right afterwards.
Okay.
we can do that.
And maybe whoever can be there, anybody who can
And the
be
one
there.
after
we'll
here,
just
we'll schedule
back
If
to
you want to
back.
stay back-to-back, now remember, we're moving to 4 meetings a year, but we're completing these 2 extra meetings this year.
Well, after maybe this year, then we can schedule one in between.
So yeah, I would like to make sure when the next meeting we have in Las Vegas, that we have, if we have both people are available for the next meeting,
I'll contact
that
them.
we'll get them
this
both
week.
to be interviewed by and dialogue about how they see the whole situation. I think both of them will be very, both of them I've heard a little bit about already and where they're coming from.
Is that
And,
nursing?
No, one
One is a lawyer that,
Okay.
and also a PH teaches ethics at Toro.
yeah, so
Well,
she has a good
I'm-
handle on it.
I'm going to look into the nursing board. Like, I'm going to look to see
They're
some
located-
decisions.
Well, Lorraine
Yeah.
is the professor of nursing up here. You and
Okay,
I.
yeah, so I'm going to look into the nursing board, and I'll provide you with something written.
That'd
I'll
be-
provide it to all of you, and then if you want me to try to expand on it, and then we can kind of go maybe with the nursing stuff on
Alex,
the
if
June.
you can identify them for me, I'll call them
Yeah,
and
I
see
will.
if I can get them to come to a meeting.
I will get you as much
And we
information.
can have more
as I
than
can.
one person come at a meeting, so we can get a couple of interviews at once. We're not trying to argue with them or anything. We're just trying to figure out how do they see the picture, and what do they think. Nobody wants to talk about it, but I think this way, and we can then react to it as.
I think one of the most interesting things would be to get somebody who was like butt out. Who told us to butt out all the way around, like it's none of our business.
We really haven't
and to
had
try
that.
to no, but it would be interesting because then how do you rationalize through that? It's
Well,
fine and easy to say, but then how do you get through it?
David and I were quite involved with it when we were seeing a particular site being handled by the Attorney General's office over this kind of stuff. And so we got fairly confident that we understood what the issues were, but nobody wanted to really address it. Everybody was avoiding it. So my suggestion is if we can do back-to-back meetings, and that's what you want at the moment, that's what we'll do.
Is that okay with everyone? I mean,
I mean, it's the easiest thing to do, so let's
Yeah,
stick
but
with that at first.
And the other issue is when you identify someone to invite, I will be more than happy to call them and invite them and tell them we're meeting at such and such a time, such and such a date, and this is the general dialogue. So I want you to think about these issues and give us your honest feedback as what you think the problem looks like and what you think a solution might be. What we may find, and I'm hoping to find, is several of them will have a similar idea, but no one knows how to go about getting it there.
Well, I think they'd appreciate us having a game plan.
Yeah, we're at least looking.
If you go in there looking more professional
Yeah.
with the questions that you have.
okay,
All right.
so let's do another quick thing. Is
Okay.
on the agenda that was posted for today, we said 2:00. Is there a way to strategize that agenda and say immediately following?
Yeah, I got to check with
That's okay.
Sarah because
Yeah.
there's a problem with when you announce and post a meeting, you're supposed to handle it. The Medical Board of Examiners got in trouble because they posted their meetings for the laws that they were trying to do when they had all that the laws that had to be changed because of some embarrassment of some type.
Right.
They said from 3:00 to 6:00, and they were stuck. They were done with the meeting at 4:30.
Right.
Everybody had appeared and made their testimony. Now they were stuck hanging around until
Till
6
6,
o'clock.
right.
There's
Just in case.
There's a little more to it than that, but it's a little more detailed.
It seems
Yeah.
to me like, Vince, though, that on the agenda, you could put that you're going to adjourn this meeting, take up this subcommittee meeting, and then adjourn.
Yeah, I want to find out from the Attorney General.
Like how
Because
you
they're
could-
both open meetings,
If we
right?
can
Yes,
do that,
it's strategize.
post the meeting to immediately follow the end of the other
Yes.
and see if that's legally compliant with the.
Yeah, can we look into that and see?
Yeah,
Because then
all right.
that way they don't hang.
Sarah owed me
we
a
don't-
favor after this morning.
Yeah, yeah. Because we could have met at 11:30, that would have been just awesome.
Yeah. Nobody comes to the meetings anyway, but we have for the open meeting law, we have to be sure we're complying with the opportunity.
But we need to end this one.
Yeah,
Or
okay,
we'll
so-
get flights.
But then I do want to just reiterate, I don't want to be inconvenient to the guests. Like, we want the guests to show up at the right time and then not be like, oh, here we are still
Well, that's
chit-chatting
too
about
bad.
X, Y,
That's
Z.
too bad. They have to. If they really want to be involved, they should
Okay,
be.
we're going to adjourn the meeting. You want to adjourn the meeting,
This
This
Madam
meeting
Chair?
is adjourned.
The meeting is adjourned at 2:47.
2:47.
We have to-